Hermeticism is based on the ancient Greek and Egyptian knowledge of Hermes. Okay, Hermes Trismegistus is basically the equivalent of Thoth in Egypt. They're basically sages of humanity that were teaching great knowledge to humanity. Now, there's a number of different texts associated with Hermeticism. The Hermetica, the Kabbalion, if you've ever heard of some of those, and some like Poimander and the Dragon, and all of these are all stories within what's called Hermeticism from Hermes. Now, Hermes describes how there is what's called natural law. There's a knowledge that became known again. If you imagine you have an ancient civilization that perfects all of this, because it's handed down to them, I believe. They lose it because they're destroyed in catastrophes around the world. And then another secret society and a group of civilizations emerges, and then they reclaim it again. Now, how they reclaim that is a whole nother conversation. Whether or not it was handed to them again, or whatever happened, and then other civilizations emerge. Dynastic Egyptians, ancient Greeks, and they then incorporate that knowledge back into their culture. The flower of life, the symbols of the triptych, all of it reintegrated back in again because they understand it. Well, Hermes was basically the greatest sage of the Greek civilization. He is their patron sage who taught them all the knowledge, right? It gets into, it's a mysterious place, like who was Hermes? Then you're now getting into a difficult road to answer, is who actually was Hermes. Was he just a man, or was he something else, like some kind of a celestial incarnation of something greater, right? And so that's where that conversation comes in. But Hermeticism are some of the best records that have been preserved from ancient times of anything. There's more of the Hermetic stuff preserved than a lot of the other stuff because it got burned in the Library of Alexandria. It was destroyed, corrupted, rewritten. But the Hermetic stuff was particularly protected because people like Isaac Newton were really interested in it. And we can get into how that all worked. Isaac Newton ended up, I believe, a lot of what his influences were with developing the concepts of the scientific revolution that occurred in the 16 and 1700s came from him studying ancient Hermeticism and understanding, so Isaac Newton, he was the one who developed all of the laws of motion, gravity, understanding the planetary motions and how precession of the equinoxes, and a lot of what we think of as called classical mechanics came from Isaac Newton. He was only superseded when Einstein came along with the theory of relativity. Well, Isaac Newton, turns out, one of his core studying areas was Hermeticism. In fact, he translated a version of the Emerald Tablet, which is an ancient Hermetic text. Completely different. They could not be more different. I feel like the Emerald Tablets have had a lot of attention throughout the years, and I've even spoken about them earlier in my work, in some of the earlier books that I've done and things that I've written about. But the Emerald Tablet needs more attention. It needs more people talking about it because it directly ties with a little bit more of a historical artifact that is more traceable, that has a lot more evidence to support it. So let me first mention what the other is, and then we'll get into the story of the Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablets is a mysterious writing from a man named Maurice Doreal. It supposedly is from ancient Egypt, but we don't actually have any evidence that it's true. No physical copy has ever been found. It was simply one man writing a bunch of things down that he says came from something. Now, I'm not saying it's completely a forgery and that there's nothing good in it. There's definitely concepts and things in there that are helpful and seem to tie to other things, but it's not like the Emerald Tablet where we have extremely tangible evidence from throughout cultures, throughout history, who retranslated it and had it be a basis for knowledge. So I think that one of the problem is that they get confused, and then one gets confused as being the other, and then vice versa. So I would personally lean a lot more on the Emerald Tablet for people that want a historical basis of understanding ancient Hermeticism and ancient Egyptian knowledge rather than the other. So, that's a whole nother conversation regarding if the other is real or not. Whereas the Emerald Tablet has a long history to it. The Emerald Tablet has been translated from not only Latin and Greek, but also Arabic It's been in numerous cultures for hundreds and hundreds of years, and a lot of philosophers and experts have leaned on it because of the knowledge it contains. And as we were talking about before, Isaac Newton actually translated his own version. One of the versions in Latin that came out was from Isaac Newton, and he extensively studied the Emerald Tablet. And I believe, based on what you learned from the Emerald Tablet, that he may have formulated a lot of his scientific theories based on the knowledge that came out of that, which then leads us to be like, realize, well, is our understanding of science coming out of the 16 and 1700s, is it attributed towards from ancient Hermetic knowledge? One of the things he got are cosmic laws. So the laws that he discusses, the laws of motion, the laws of planetary bodies, the laws of life creating, I think different things that the functionality of physical reality, a lot of that is discussed in the Emerald Tablet. So the Emerald Tablet it's discussing natural law and how everything functions in our world. So if we get into the background of it, if the famous concept as above, so below, that came from the Emerald Tablet. That's where that concept first originated is talking about how celestial aspects like astrology and planetary movements play a huge role with how consciousness and life functions here on Earth. And that's where the idea that like Da Vinci got, where we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, is that a lot of what's playing out on the external is playing out within us. And a lot of those ideas came from that, but also natural law, like planetary movements and functions and how he determined gravity. A lot of those core concepts came from Hermetic knowledge. How do we know that those ancient cultures knew more than just looking and mimicking nature? That they actually knew real detailed knowledge of higher level things. And so the story of the Emerald Tablet is pretty incredible, actually, and I don't really hear many people talk about it, so I wanted to tell you the story of how it got found. There was a man named Balinus. Balinus is described in the Arabic and Latin versions as being a philosopher and a mystic and a master of talismans who is studying ancient knowledge, and he's an esoteric master, and he ends up having a dream. This dream tells him of a statue of Hermes Trismegistus, in which there's something buried underneath it. And so he goes on this expedition to go and find this statue based off a dream. That's exactly what that really says. And so Balinus travels to southern Turkey to a place called Tyana. And in Tyana, he's searching, because that's where I guess his leads or his information has led to. He finds this ancient statue of Hermes, just like in his dream. And in below that statue, he finds an ancient crypt, a passageway that leads to a cave underneath. This is wild, but I'm telling you, it's 100% true. And when he goes down into this cave, he finds this stone statue of a man with his hands sticking out. And with two hands, one hand has the Emerald Tablet and the other hand has a book. The book is called The Book of Secrets, or Secrets of Secrets. This is the story that is actually has a lot of evidence to support it, that it's really true. Now, the Emerald Tablet was not made out of emerald. That's a misnomer. It was actually made out of jade. And that's the material it was called. It was just called the Emerald Tablet. But from that tablet, it then became translated in, again, I said Arabic, Latin, and Greek, and was taught by philosophers around the world. It became the basis for where the Philosopher's Stone came from. That's the entire basis behind the Philosopher's Stone. Because the tablet not only talks about natural law and phenomenon, but it talks about alchemy. And it talks about how you can create any kind of alchemical output metal that you want out of two things: sulfur and iron, which is strange, but it discusses how that's the basis behind anything you want to create, including gold. And so that was where a lot of philosophers became extremely interested in the Emerald Tablet, because of this idea of a philosopher's stone.
And where again did we get the story? What was his name?
Balinus.
Balinus. Where again did we get that story where it's verified?
That story comes from a number of Arabic, Latin, and Greek sources from different books, the Book of Creation and the Book of Secrets. There's different books that are based on the story of where the Emerald Tablet was found, and it's well documented from how that story goes. Because it was such an obsession of philosophers and alchemists, the story was continued and versed over in numerous different places, and actually has a lot of evidence to support it. That's why Isaac Newton ended up studying it. The Emerald Tablet was found in the 8th century, around 1200 years ago. Balinus traveled to a place that no longer exists any longer called Tyana, and that was where this statue of Hermes was supposedly found, with this crypt where it was discovered underneath it. We know that the Greeks had a lot of roles in southern and western Turkey. There's a lot of ancient Greek cities. And so we know that that area was an ancient region, and of course ties into even some of the other things we were talking about. But it forms the basis of us trying to understand how ancient civilizations and cultures seem to understand knowledge different than even we do today. And then other cultures have come along and tried to mimic it. I don't think we personally give ancient civilizations enough credit. Our technology is based on these machines that we've mastered to become advanced, right? Like if you think about how far we've come from the very first computers and radios and televisions to where we are now with phones.
Crazy.
It's unbelievable, right? But what about the idea of how far a culture could come thousands of years under their belt with a different kind of technology?